Picture this for a moment.
Yeah.
Deep inside a major modern country, one you'd easily find on a map, there were these dense jungles.
Mm.
And hidden within them,
Yeah.
armed groups.
Mm.
And they've been there, locked in this struggle, for decades. Not just a quick conflict, but like a constant reality.
A persistent reality, yeah.
This isn't some movie plot. It's the story of India's Maoist insurgency. You might have heard them called the Naxalites.
It's a name that carries a lot of weight in India.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And forget simple good guys versus bad guys. This is, it's incredibly complex. It's all tangled up with land, power, and just chaos, really.
Yeah.
And it's been going on since the 1960s.
It really is a deeply entrenched challenge. We're not talking about some small fringe group here. This is a movement with real historical roots and a huge impact on a pretty large part of the country and on the people living there, of course.
Definitely. And that name, Naxalites.
Yeah.
It points directly back to the start, doesn't it?
It does. Naxalbari.
Yeah, Naxalbari, 1967. A village in West Bengal up in the Darjeeling district. It all kicked off from a local land dispute, apparently. A farmer couldn't work his land.
Right. A seemingly small incident, but it tapped into something much bigger.
Exactly. And people there, inspired by Mao Zedong's communist ideas, figures like Charu Majumdar were involved. They basically decided enough was enough.
And their first weapons weren't guns, were they?
No, not at all. It was like sickles and sticks, just what they had, fueled by this really strong sense of injustice.
That initial Naxalbari uprising, well, it was put down relatively quickly, within about 3 months, I think, but it became this huge symbol.
The birth of this specific kind of resistance in India.
Exactly. It resonated with these long simmering frustrations, especially around land, and social inequality. And Mao's theories gave it this revolutionary framework.
So even though Naxalbari itself was crushed, the embers kept glowing. The issues didn't just disappear.
Not at all. The movement didn't vanish. It just splintered. Different groups popped up, but they all shared that core idea.
The People's War, aiming to overthrow the Indian state.
Right. And then came a really big moment in 2004.
The formation of the Communist Party of India, Maoist.
Precisely. The CPI, Maoist. It merged several of these older factions, and that's largely the main group we're talking about today, still pursuing that goal.
A communist state in India.
That 2004 merger basically unified the most radical elements. It gave them a more, let's say, coherent structure and a very clear goal. Overthrow the state through a protracted people's war.
And that's not just about quick attacks, is it? It's a long game.
It's a long-term strategy. Build power in the countryside, weaken the state bit by bit, and then eventually challenge the cities. It's straight out of Mao's playbook.
And the main place where this war is happening, people call it the Red Corridor. If you picture a map of India, it's this belt stretching across central and eastern parts. States like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Bihar.
Parts of Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, West Bengal, too. It's a significant area.
Yeah. Like a really tricky bit of terrain on a game board,
Right.
Full of obstacles.
That difficult terrain point is key. Geographically, we're talking dense forests, hills, often very rich in minerals, too.
Right. And socioeconomically.
Marked by widespread poverty and huge populations of Adivasi, the indigenous tribal communities.
Okay, so these are often areas lacking the basics, like electricity, schools, proper health care.
Very often, yes. And this long-term neglect of the Adivasi people is just critical to understanding the whole thing.
You can see how that creates an opening, right?
Yeah.
Imagine living there, no access to essentials, feeling vulnerable. And then a group comes along promising to fight for your rights, fix things the state hasn't.
It's understandable how that message could resonate. The historical marginalization, the exploitation, it created fertile ground for the Maoist ideology, the lack of services, land being taken for projects. It fostered this deep sense of grievance.
And in the areas where they gain control, the Maoists do more than just fight, don't they? They sometimes set up their own administrations.
Sort of parallel structures, yeah. They might run informal schools, basic clinics, even their own justice systems.
But that justice can be pretty brutal, from what I understand.
It certainly can. Resolving local disputes, maybe over land or water, but using their own methods. And that often includes violence, coercion, killing people they suspect are informers.
It's not just about providing services then.
No. Establishing these structures is part of the strategy, showing an alternative to the state where the state is weak. But yeah, their methods are often violent. We've seen awful things like the assassination of that MP, Sunil Mahato, back in 2007.
And that ambush in 2013. killing all those Congress leaders, Mahendra Karma included.
Devastating examples of their ruthlessness, yes.
So who are the actual fighters, the foot soldiers in this? Their armed wing is the People's Liberation Guerrilla Army, the PLGA.
That's right, the PLGA. Estimates vary, but maybe somewhere between, say, 8 and 15,000 fighters currently.
Have a makeup of that group.
Overwhelmingly Adivasi, from those local communities. Maybe 80, even 90%.
So not necessarily hardened ideologues from the start.
Often not. Often young, poor, feeling completely left behind by the system. As Nandini Sundar, the sociologist, pointed out, they're deeply embedded in these villages.
Part of the fabric of the community.
Exactly, which gives them huge advantages. They know the terrain intimately, they have family ties, local support, makes guerrilla warfare very effective for them. Their reasons for joining are often very personal, very local grievances.
But the leadership,
Yeah,
a different story.
often, yes. A real contrast. The top leaders, figures like Ganapathy, the former general secretary, they tend to be, urban, educated, ideologues.
People who've consciously chosen this path left another life behind for the jungle.
Right. They're the ones steeped in Mao's theories, focused on that long-term, protracted people's war, encircling the cities from the countryside.
So a real difference between the rank and file driven by local issues and the ideologically driven leadership with the big picture goal.
Absolutely. The leadership is focused on that ultimate goal, overthrowing the Indian state, which they see as a tool of imperialists, big corporations, and feudal lords, and establishing a communist state. That adherence to Mao's strategy is central for them.
And when you dig down into the root causes, it keeps coming back to land, resources, and justice, doesn't it?
Always. The Red Corridor is incredibly rich. Coal, bauxite, iron ore, huge deposits.
Which creates conflict. The drive for industrialization versus the people living on that land.
Precisely. That push for economic development, for resource extraction, has frequently happened at the expense of the Adivasi communities. Displacement, environmental damage, and feeling like they get none of the benefits. It breeds resentment.
There was that U.S. State Department report back in 2007.
Yeah, the statistic is stark. It said 55% of people displaced by development projects in India were tribals.
55%, even though they're only about 8% of the population.
It really highlights the systemic inequality. The development model often just steamrollered over their rights and livelihoods, and the Maoists were very quick to jump on that.
Positioning themselves as defenders.
Exactly. Organizing protests against mines, sometimes sabotaging operations. Remember that attack on the bauxite mine in Odisha in 2008. They frame themselves as protectors of Adivasi rights against corporations and the state.
And it's broader than just mining, right? It's the general neglect.
Yes. Poverty, illiteracy, lack of doctors, schools, roads, all these systemic failures, the Maoists tap into that whole feeling of abandonment.
Their narrative is basically, the state failed you, we haven't.
And for many people in those regions, sadly, that narrative reflects their reality. The state's absence or its negative presence created a vacuum the Maoists could step into, offering purpose, belonging, a promise to fight for them.
But, and this is the crucial contradiction, their actions often hurt the very people they claim to protect.
Definitely.
Wow.
That IED attack in Bijapur in 2021, killing 9 civilians, it's a devastating example.
So while they target security forces, civilians get caught in the middle, or even targeted themselves.
Yes, accused of being informers or just collateral damage, it seriously undermines their claim to represent the people's interests, raises huge ethical questions.
So, faced with this decades-long insurgency, what has the government done? Operation Green Hunt comes to mind?
Launched in 2009, yeah. That was a major escalation, a big, coordinated counterinsurgency campaign.
Huge numbers of troops, right?
Tens of thousands of paramilitary forces deployed into the Red Corridor, aimed at dismantling Maoist strongholds, disrupting their networks.
And the government points to successes. Fewer attacks, fewer Maoist-controlled areas.
They do. They cite statistics showing a drop in violence since the peak years, like a 77% drop between 2009 and 2021. Fewer incidents overall, thousands of Maoists killed or arrested or surrendered.
We still see reports of big clashes, though, like in Chhattisgarh in 2024.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely ongoing. And alongside the security operations, there are development efforts, roads, schools, health centers being built, trying to win hearts and minds, too.
But has that development push worked? And what about the critiques of the security approach?
Well, the development is often hampered by the ongoing insecurity. And trust is a huge issue. Plus, the counterinsurgency itself has faced serious criticism.
Human rights abuses.
Persistent accusations, yes. extrajudicial killings, so-called fake encounters, where suspects are allegedly killed in staged gunfights.
That incident in Pedia village, Chhattisgarh, in 2024, 12 people killed. Huge controversy over whether they were civilians or fighters.
Exactly. And then there was that reported anonymous admission from a DRG commando saying civilians died. It raises serious questions.
The DRG, the District Reserve Guards, they're made up of locals, right? Tribals, even former Maoists.
Yes, which gives them invaluable local knowledge, terrain, language, networks.
But concerns about their methods, too. Alienating communities.
That's the risk. Their local knowledge is effective, but there are worries about indiscriminate tactics, maybe settling old scores. It's a double-edged sword. It can sometimes make things worse at the community level.
And then there was Salwa Judum.
Yes. The government-backed civilian militia formed around 2005.
Highly controversial. Declared illegal by the Supreme Court, actually, wasn't it?
In 2011, yes. Though the National Human Rights Commission had a slightly different take initially, but it was widely accused of atrocities, forcing people into camps, even using child soldiers.
A real disaster, basically.
Yeah.
Turning tribe against tribe.
It massively escalated violence within the communities, a stark warning about arming civilian groups in these situations.
When you look at the numbers, the human cost is just staggering.
It really is. Over 12,000 lives lost just since the early 2000s.
And that includes civilians, security forces.
Around 4,000 civilians, 2,500 security personnel. Just devastating figures. The peak years, 2009, 2010, saw over 1,000 deaths each year.
And it's still happening. Clashes in February 2025, January 2025. It's not history.
Exactly. And beyond the numbers, think about the communities living with this constant fear, the displacement, the loss. Sons, daughters, hope.
That story of Rameshwar Negi in Bastar, killed in 2024, labeled a Maoist, but his family says he was unarmed. Heartbreaking.
These individual stories get lost sometimes, but they're the reality. And then there's the issue of child recruitment.
Accusations against both sides.
Yes, the Maoists deny it, but there are reports. And concerns were raised about the government's special police officers, including teenagers, and certainly about Salwa Judum using child soldiers. Even if the NHRC cleared them later on that specific point, it's a grave issue.
And this brings us back inevitably to the mining connection.
You can't ignore it. The Red Corridor's wealth. Chhattisgarh alone has, 85% of India's coal?
Huge economic stakes. For mining companies, for the government?
Absolutely. And this intersects directly with the Adivasi resistance to being evicted for these projects.
With the Maoists then leverage.
Skillfully, framing their fight as resistance against corporate greed, against the state facilitating the plunder, as they put it in a 2024 statement, plunder of land, forests, water.
And they do disrupt operations.
Yeah.
Like that bauxite production in Odisha.
Yes, there have been attacks specifically targeting mining infrastructure. It reinforces their narrative.
Well, the government talks about development, rebuilding a health center the Maoists destroyed, for example.
Right, like the Patali Sub-Health Center. The government highlights that as progress.
But the underlying land issues, the displacement, they often remain.
That's the core tension. There's often a huge gap between the official development narrative and the reality people experience on the ground. Projects might bring some benefits, but if they also displace people or disrupt lives without fair compensation or alternatives, they can just fuel the conflict further.
So putting it all together, why has this dragged on for so long? Why is it so hard to resolve?
Several key factors, really. First, the terrain. As we said, dense forests, hills, it favors the insurgents, makes it hard for conventional forces.
Guerrilla territory.
Exactly. Second, the unresolved Adivasi grievances. Land loss, poverty, neglect. It's a constant source of recruitment and local support, or at least acquiescence.
The root causes haven't gone away.
Largely, no. Third, the government's approach. While aimed at restoring order, the heavy-handedness, the alleged abuses, it can alienate people, push them towards the Maoists, even if unintentionally.
Undermining trust.
Critically, you need local support to beat an insurgency, and actions that erode that trust are counterproductive.
And the Maoist ideology itself. Its role and persistence.
It provides purpose, unity, a framework. That's its strength. But it can also be rigid, maybe impractical in some ways. We saw how COVID-19 hit their supply lines in 2020, showing vulnerabilities.
But they adapt. They endure.
They've shown remarkable resilience, suggesting a deep ideological commitment among the core cadres, despite setbacks.
So looking ahead, the government has set this deadline, March 2026, to crush the insurgency. They estimate maybe 1,200 fighters left in Bastar. Is that realistic?
It sounds ambitious, given the history. The conflict is deeply entrenched. The underlying issues remain. While the government might be optimistic, ending it definitively by a specific date seems, well, challenging. They've proven very adaptable over the years.
What about peace talks? Is that a possibility?
It's always discussed as a potential path, but there seems to be an impasse. Reports suggest the Maoists demand a ceasefire first, which the government refuses.
And meanwhile, the Adivasi communities are stuck in the middle.
Tragically, yes, incredibly precarious. Shalini Jara, the lawyer working in Bastar, talks about the deep suspicion indigenous communities have towards outsiders, the fear of resource colonization.
That really cuts to the heart of it, doesn't it?
It does, which suggests maybe the only real long-term solution involves genuinely addressing those fears, securing land rights, ensuring communities benefit from resource extraction, ending displacement.
A radical shift in approach.
Perhaps. Addressing the root causes, building trust. It's likely more effective than military solutions alone in the long run.
Shubhranshu Choudhury, the peace activist, even warned, what was it? That if peace isn't handled carefully, it could degenerate.
Into something like a gang war, yeah.
Yeah.
Fragmentation, more localized violence, criminalization, it's a serious warning. Highlights the need for a real, inclusive political solution.
So wrapping this up, it's just incredibly complex, isn't it? This decades-long conflict, ideology, injustice, violence, all mixed together.
And a terrible human cost. Over 10,000 deaths since the late 60s. Deep, deep scars.
You have the Maoists claiming to fight for the marginalized, but using brutal violence.
Often against those same marginalized people. And the state trying to restore order, but sometimes at great human cost, facing accusations of abuses. It's full of these paradoxes.
And for listeners maybe living far away, why should they care? It feels distant.
But it's connected. The resources from the Red Corridor fuel India's economy, which has global links.
Yeah.
And the core issues, poverty, inequality, land rights, they're universal.
It's a reminder of how interconnected things are, that the minerals from there might end up in products we use.
Exactly. And the struggles for justice there resonate with similar situations worldwide.
So maybe the next time we hear a news headline, Naxal attack, we should pause.
Think beyond the label.
Think about the individual stories. The farmer in Naxalbari in '67, the tribal villager in Bastar today, the soldier in the jungle. They're all part of this long, ongoing story.
And it underlines how crucial it is to listen to marginalized communities, address their grievances, pursue peace justly. Ignoring those voices has consequences that last generations.
Let's hope the future for the Red Corridor can finally move beyond this cycle of violence, towards something built on real engagement, addressing those deep inequalities.
That has to be the hope. A peaceful future requires tackling the roots of the conflict, not just the symptoms. Until then, we need to keep paying attention, keep asking questions,